Welcome to our complimentary webinar, which is brought to you today in partnership with Auscontact's national gold sponsor, Verint, and it's entitled Internal Intelligent Virtual Assistants, the Emerging Hybrid Workforce. During the next 60 minutes or so, with the help of today's special guest, Beaver, Chief Scientist, Verint, we hope you'll be reflecting on your approach, asking lots of questions, as well as taking some opportunities back to your respective organisations. There will be a Q&A at the end of the session. I'm Fiona Keough, CEO of Auscontact and your moderator for today. While we're waiting for everyone to join, let's use the time to run through some housekeeping, which will enable you to interact with us to maximise the benefit. And as you know, there's no need to take too many notes because we'll be providing you with the slides and recording of the webinar. To interact with us, please click the Q&A tab on the control panel and then type your questions. You can ask questions or make comments for Ian or myself from time to time. Don't forget, we're going to have a full Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So if you're like me and you forget what you want to ask, if I don't type it immediately, just do that throughout the webinar and that way you won't forget to ask them. I know that many of you are familiar with asking questions, but let's try out the questions pane on the control panel now, just in case. And the practice question for today is, what are you doing over the seasonal holidays this year? Ian, what are you doing over the seasonal holidays?
Well, avoiding the snow.
Bit different to Australia, very much so, yeah? I'm starting to turn green. There's somebody on here called Paul who's going to Vienna during the holidays. Jacqueline's not working. Annette, I'm with you, girlfriend, drinking champagne. Yay. Jeffrey's working, but he's got a week off in January. And Chris is sleeping. My goodness me. That's a long, long sleep. Oh, and Ian is telling us he's got beach and bikes. Fantastic. Well, there you go. Most people, it seems, that have already joined us have got some wonderful plans. What am I doing? I'm going to see my mother-in-law, who's about a 5-hour drive from where we live. So let's keep moving through. If you're listening through headphones or speakers and experience any issues with your internet connection, please note that on the control panel you can actually click on another tab to raise your hand and one of the Auscontact team will rush to your aid. Failing that, you can also switch to the telephone, but to do that you'll need to go back to the original email where you received the link to get the toll-free number and all the information to rejoin us. Of course, that makes it a little difficult to see the screen. So with that, I'm pleased to get you guys to do some more work, and I can hear you going, fantastic. I can actually hear virtual cheering. So let's launch our poll, please, Jess. And the poll for today is, what are your thoughts on using intelligent virtual assistants or AI to assist your employees? And the options that you have available to you is, I don't think it would have that much of an impact. Nice in principle, but skeptical on the true value it would provide. It might help non-voice users, but it wouldn't work with voice contact center. And it would, or the last option, it would make some customer service team members' lives easier. Ian, while we're getting the answers to the poll, in our last webinar, and welcome back by the way, you spoke about customer-facing intelligent virtual assistants. Is that a prerequisite for Agent Assist?
Not at all. Really, you can take the same technology and you can deploy it anywhere. It's very much a virtual person in the sense that any channel or mechanism that you could use to speak to another person, like even over this WebEx, for example, you could figure out a way to get a virtual assistant over that same channel. So whether you have that virtual assistant deployed externally to your customers or internally to help your employees be more efficient and find answers to common questions, it really is a technology that is very flexible.
Excellent. Well, Jess, we've got more than half of our attendees having answered the question. Why don't you share the results of the poll with everybody that's here? Fabulous. Okay. Well, Ian, you must be pleased to see this. 91% said it would make customer service team members' lives easier. And the only other response was that 9% of our attendees said, nice in principle, but a bit sceptical on the true value it provides. So you've got a little bit of work today.
Well, I think we can probably just stop the talk now. Everybody agrees.
No. We want to hear more. We want to learn more.
Okay, for the sake of the 9%, we'll continue. Okay, well, let me get my slides here. Sorry. Okay. So I'm going to start out. Well, first off, thank you, Fiona, for the introduction, and it's good to be back. Today I'm going to talk to you about IVAs and how they work internally to improve company efficiencies and work alongside customer service agents, or CSAs, as I will refer to them in this talk, although they go by many other names depending on your background or organizations, to improve customer service experience and really reduce the time to resolution. So some background on the company first. Verint Next IT builds custom IVAs on behalf of large companies, organizations, and government agencies. And they started about 2002 working for the United States government in the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And they built a product around an autonomous agent that went over internet relay chat. If anybody remembers IRC, it's still out there, it's still a thing. And these virtual assistants are omni-channel, meaning that you can take a singular deployment or language model, and that can support any channel of communication. So whether you're talking about social like Facebook or Twitter or SMS or chat over the phone, really any way that you can talk to another human, you can put a virtual assistant behind that channel. And on the other hand, it supports deep integrations with backend systems. So you can get into flight search databases and customer account databases and things and perform tasks on behalf of customers just the same as a customer service rep could. And Next IT was acquired by Verint about 2 years ago, and we were integrated into a business unit with several other self-service companies. And I'm going to talk a bit more about those integrations that we've done later on. Myself, I joined Next IT in 2006. I've been in the research group the whole time. I'm the chief scientist, so I run both the pure and applied research groups. We focus on means to detect and resolve misunderstandings between humans and machines as they talk to each other. We don't work so much on the IVA itself. We really work on the ecosystem sort of supporting the IVA. So we do a lot of data processing, experimentation, discovering new ways to automate or augment tasks that humans are performing today. We look at what people are doing and how could we use technology to automate those or at least help them in those tasks. Sometimes that means applying an IVA. Sometimes it's the development or an improvement of analysis applications that are integrated into our suite. So that's just sort of the, where I'm coming from and who is Verint Next IT. So next I'm going to do a quick overview of an IVA. Many of you are probably familiar with IVAs at this point, just because they're becoming ubiquitous. But there's some differences between, there's some confusion, I guess, around what is an IVA versus a personal assistant like Alexa or Google Assistant or Apple Siri. IVAs, you can think of them like a virtual employee. They represent a company or an organization, and they're there to help the users or the customers accomplish tasks. So these dialogues are very task-oriented, unlike an open domain chatbot, which is really there for entertainment purposes or just to gather knowledge, or a personal assistant, which is there to just support a single individual or household. So here is an example of an IVA window. It's a banking application. And I'm just going to kind of step through this to kind of highlight some features. So first we see the conversation is launched by the user who's named Alex here. And these conversations are contextual. So the IVAs are integrated either into a website, a mobile application, or something where they're aware of the environment, and if the user has logged into the website, that information is passed to the virtual assistant. So Alex presumably has logged into his IRA account or something like that. And so when the virtual assistant is launched, it says, "Welcome back, Alex. I see you're searching for information on IRAs. How can I help you with that?" And in this case, Alex replies, "What's the balance of my IRA?" So there we go. We have this personalized interaction. So because Alex is logged in, we can now do that backend integration, look into the account database, see that Alex has a particular IRA known as a Roth IRA, and he's got $10,000 in there. Now, if he had had multiple different kinds of IRAs, we might have to clarify and say, well, I see you have 3 accounts with us. Which of these accounts would you like the balance of? In this case, we assume he's got 1. So we're able to use the information from the backend system to directly, in a natural language way, respond. So we give him the answer, and we say, is there anything else we can help you with? This highlights really the natural flow of conversation. So instead of the IVA trying to drive Alex down some predefined conversational tree or flow, saying, I can help you with one of the following, please select from one of the following, or you can say this or that. It's very open-ended. It says, how can I help you with that? Is there anything else I can help you with? It's letting Alex take the conversation whichever way he wants to go. So then Alex says, how much money did I invest this year? Now this seems like a natural flow, but if you were to take that input in isolation, it's very ambiguous. And this is one of the challenges with natural language processing, is resolving that ambiguity. So how much money did I invest in this year requires that you understand the context of the current conversation is around his particular Roth IRA account. And the IVA understands this, that we have been up to this point talking about your Roth IRA. And so when you ask me questions, I'm going to assume that they have to do with that IRA unless you tell me otherwise. So we can use that conversation to assume he's talking about his Roth IRA and answer his question. So once again, we go back to the back end and we can say your 2018 IRA contribution is $2,000. Here's another integration point. Virtual assistants can be deeply integrated into knowledge management engines to find relevant articles or anything that can help the user in their task. So it finds an article explaining investment options and gives it to the user as a way to help them basically understand what the contribution limits are and anything around just the government regulations on IRAs. And finally, as I mentioned before, this can happen over multiple modalities. So Alex could be talking to this this virtual assistant. He could be typing in a text box. He could be touching controls on a website or a mobile application. Really, as I said, any channel that you can talk to a human, you can get a virtual assistant integrated. So this is just kind of a high-level overview of what an IVA can do. And here is a real-world example. This is a screenshot from an IVA that's hosted on a airline website. And on the top right there, you can see the user's turn in the conversation. So how can I take more than one bag on a plane? And then there's the agent response. And this is really to just show the level of sort of control that an IVA has over its environment. So not only does it answer the user's question directly in text, it also says, here's some additional topics that you may be interested in, or I predict you might be interested in based on what you've asked me so far. So for example, these could be follow-on things or related topics that the user might have questions about given the answer that was just given by the IVA. And in the left side there, you can see that this IVA window is actually part of a website. And the IVA has automatically navigated the user's browser to the web page that has to do exactly with carry-on baggage. So this is just demonstrating that an IVA response is so much more than just a natural language response. It can control its environment and really direct the user places it needs to go, push information the user might need, and perform tasks on behalf of the user as it moves forward in the conversation. So in Verint, intelligent self-service, we are a, as I said, aggregation of several different technologies. And here is sort of a high-level architecture showing how these things work together. So we have an IVR company that that Verint has acquired that we integrated with. We have various knowledge management engines and backend systems that the IVA works with. And on the left there are the channels that the end users can communicate with. So you can do a voice, text, anything you can really think of, SMS, web, social, smart speakers, so on. And any voice channels go through the IVR, and any textual channels and so forth can go directly to the virtual assistant in text form. But the point is that all of these conversations are flowing to that same knowledge, or really the language model that is deployed within this virtual assistant. So in investing in a virtual assistant, you can host that same knowledge, that same system in such a way that regardless of what channel the user is contacting you over, it's going through the same virtual assistant. And so you're basically able to reuse that investment over and over as you add these channels. And we can carry the context of a conversation across channels because it's all the same system on the back end. There's also escalation paths. So for example, if the user is talking to a virtual assistant and it gets stuck or it's trying to do a complex task, we can escalate that to a live customer service agent as necessary, whether it's over a voice channel or to live chat or messaging if it's over a text channel. And so humans can remain sort of involved in this process, but this is sort of a traditional customer-facing deployment of IVA. And a customer here could also be an internal employee. For example, if you had an HR agent or an IT help desk agent. But the goal here is really to maintain the context between these channels. So now that I've covered the background and the scope of IVAs, I'll focus on how they're being applied to help companies automate internal workflows and aid CSAs with live support. So here is really some analysis of the general marketplace, and these come from various analyst groups, Forrester and so on, that have done surveys just to see kind of the feeling in the marketplace as far as customer engagement. And according to their surveys, they found that war rooms consider customer experience one of their top performance metrics by a wide margin, and that many companies are really trying to improve their operational efficiencies. And so you've got this, really, you're trying to balance the costs of operational efficiency with the elevating of the customer experience. Most companies that were polled expect a rise in customer interaction over the next 2 years. And to handle this, executives are expecting to grow their customer service headcount over the next year. So because of this, it's never been a better time to be in the customer engagement market, but creating more customer engagements than ever before over multiple channels, and there are more and more channels being added as technologies are sort of expanding. It's generating a strain on customer service departments. And as on the right there it shows, most organizations are responding by throwing bodies at it. And this is really unsustainable. You can't hire infinity, and headcount today is by far the biggest cost of customer engagement operating budget, and it keeps growing. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to reduce headcount costs, or at least keep them static, while elevating the customer experience and dealing with this projection of increased customer interactions. So organizations are seeking innovative technologies to modernize and achieve these strategic objectives. Really, here's some more projections by analyst companies. In this case, it's Gartner. I'm not really sure how accurate these predictions can be. 3 years in the future, we'll find out. But the idea is that as automated self-service takes over the easy cases, such as password resets, FAQ type things, the remaining complex cases will be increasingly handled by AI-assisted humans. And this is really a new field. So in 2017 they saw in their surveys that 48% of contacts were being handled through customer self-service. and virtual assistants fall in that group. 52% were handled by live agents, agent interactions. But their projection is, and they're seeing this as the market is really growing and changing, more contacts will be handled by self-service, and those that go through to an agent will be now handled by a hybrid group of assisted self-service, where an agent is involved and a machine is involved in helping reach resolution. And a very small remaining portion will be the traditional agent interactions. So this slide is really just to demonstrate that not all IVAs or chatbots are created equal. All of them will drive efficiency at some level, but the degrees to which they drive service value for both your business and your customers or employees will vary based on the abilities of the technology and the use cases that you choose to automate. So on the bottom left there, answering obvious questions, this would be your sort of a frequently asked question type chatbot. So you go in and it's really just there to provide information for people. You ask a question, you get an answer. As you increase the complexity of these virtual assistants to where on the y-axis there, you're increasing value to the enterprise because you're automating more and more of the work that's being done by these live human agents. And you're driving more value to the customer because now you're getting to the point where you can help agents be more efficient than they would have been without this coach or this expert that is helping them to perform these tasks. So, as I mentioned before, the old sort of mindset to handle this increased volume is to throw more humans at it. And there are some benefits to this. It doesn't help reduce costs, but it does help scale to the demands of the increased contacts. And the pro and cons list I'm showing are not complete, but they're at least the higher level issues. So the pros are humans understand complex tasks very well, and they can be taught complex tasks. They can also explain the reason behind why they took an action, usually, hopefully. So if you ask a human, why did you do this, or why did you answer it this way, they can sort of explain themselves. The downside to just throwing more humans at the problem is that humans work relatively slow, and they are expensive, and those costs are increasing. They're also unreliable in the sense that, for one, they're sick, they can get sick, they can take a vacation, those sorts of things. You have to do knowledge transfer with new employees, and that doesn't always go the way that you want. There's turnover and such, but also they're subjective. If you ask two people to perform the same task, depending on the complexity of that task and their training, the outcomes may vary. So the new way, apparently, is everybody just throws machine learning at it, whatever that means to you. And this is a very, I guess, convoluted topic. But the pros are the machine models are much faster and cheaper than humans. Once they're trained, they can perform very quickly. They can automate tasks very reliably. In other words, they're deterministic. So given the same environment and the same input, these models should produce the same output. However, they are difficult to train complex tasks. And it's also very difficult to understand why a machine learned model did something. And you can actually get a PhD today in trying to just figure out the answer to why did it do that. People are working on what's called interpretable models all over the place, and that's a very active field of research. One thing to notice here is that the pros and the cons between the humans and the machines are the inverse of each other. And this is really an important observation to make, and I'm going to build on that moving forward. But first we have to define what is an acceptable performance for a machine. So if we're going to deploy a machine in the place of a human, at what point is the machine doing well enough that we will trust it? So if an ATM machine gets the check right amount 95% of the time, is that acceptable to be deployed? If a self-driving car makes the right decisions 99% of the time, is that trustworthy on the road? If an automatic disease identification app has an 80% success rate, would you trust it with your health? So notice the error of 5% may be acceptable for an ATM, but probably not for a car. This means each application will have a different gap between what a machine is able to perform using the current advancements in technology and what is acceptable and where you're trying to deploy it. So is there a way to make up this gap? And there is, and it's called human in the loop. That is a sort of an academic term, but there are different definitions of human in the loop based on which branch of science you're approaching it from. But the basic definition, it's a model that requires human input. So looking back at our previous slides, what are machines good at? Well, they're good at crunching data, pattern recognition, finding statistical inferences and things. What are humans good at? Well, they're good at logic, they're good at reasoning, they're good at performing these complicated tasks. So when you mix the two, you're really creating a human-in-the-loop system. So here's a simple everyday example of this. You have an ATM machine. It's not confident in reading checks from my mother who has horrible handwriting. So 5% of the time, it can't read the check because of the handwriting or the pen ink smeared or whatever. In those instances, it will escalate to the human that put the check into the machine and ask them to manually read and enter the check value in these cases. So the machine is handling 95% of the effort in processing these checks. 5% of the time, the human is taking over and dealing with the special cases. Those two working together, you get 100% successful ATM deposits. This is really the idea of creating these human-machine hybrid groups that can work together to do better and still be able to scale to the volumes and the demands of customer service. So how do we leverage human in the loop with IVA implementations? Well, going to the contact center, as an example here, we have customer service agents that are working away using some dashboard of some kind on their desktop. And Verint's product for this is called engagement management. It's a software that runs on the agent desktop that helps them navigate knowledge bases, and they talk to the customers through this. And in this example, we're talking about live chat. Here, in live chat environments and in social environments, social media environments, a single customer service agent may be handling multiple conversations at the same time. So it can actually, a good customer service agent can jump back and forth between several chat windows and handle 2 or 3 conversations simultaneously. Obviously, you can't do that so easily over the phone, but the idea is really still there that I'm going to talk about in a second. So we're trying to scale this person. We're getting more and more customers, or our contact volume is increasing. We need to be able to take that customer service agent and replicate them, but we don't want to take the cost of more people on. So how can we apply what we just learned about human in the loop? If we could take computers and use them to take care of the easy stuff, that low-hanging fruit of customer contacts, then we can regulate the humans to handling the special cases or the complex tasks. We can have success. So to do this, the human in the loop approach would be to add a virtual assistant into this platform and allow the virtual assistant to take over some of the work from the human customer service agent. Now, at Verint, we've implemented this in 2 different ways. Either IVAs can talk directly to the customers handling easy cases, like password resets and so on, and they let the more difficult cases they haven't been trained on to pass through the queue onto the humans. And if you do this approach, you can turn, say, a 100-seat call center into the productivity of maybe a 200-seat call center or more, really depending on the distribution of the types of contacts you're getting over what the IVA has been programmed to handle. So for example, if you take the top 5 or 10 reasons that customers are contacting your call center, and you automate those, typically they make up for 50% or more of your total contacts. And if the virtual assistant is able to handle those, then you really only have to have people handling, 50 or 40 or 30% of the total call or contact volume. The second way that we have implemented this, which I'm going to actually talk a lot more about, is how having IVAs just directly assist the contact center agents as they talk to the customers, making them more efficient. So if we can take over all of their busy work, all of the things that takes them time to do while they're on a call or while they're on a chat, and let the virtual assistant automate that, we can save them time so that they can just focus on talking to the customer. So here are some numbers that have come from this product. And so the product within Verint is called Agent Assist. And this is that second example I talked about where IVAs are integrated to the agent dashboard, helping the CSAs as they talk to the customers. And they integrate with real-time speech and legacy systems and so on. They ensure that compliance is happening. They can do routing as far as going to the right experts and so on. So there's sort of two high-level example case studies here, and I'm going to talk about several case studies in detail later on, but this is just to kind of give you a teaser of the type of productivity gains that are possible by doing this approach. So in the States here, one of our customers is a large managed healthcare company. They do health insurance and so on. And where they integrated their virtual assistant into their agent dashboard was to help with claims processing. And so they were able to drop the average handling time 64% by just adding this virtual assistant to help the CSAs basically get resolution with the contacts. And one of the main reasons for this was one of the things that customer service agents had to continuously do was to look up specific codes related to policies, definitions, acronyms, and so on. So someone would come in and they would use specific acronyms or something related to their policy. And they also, as an individual, would have a different policy than maybe a different caller. And so the CSA has to take their specific policy into account as far as also understanding what they're saying. So they have to look up what acronyms mean, they have to look up what definitions are, what their policy coverage is, to take that into account to be able to answer the person's question or handle their task. So the virtual assistant supports over 7,000 of these codes, meaning you can just ask the IVA, what does this code mean, and it will tell you, instead of having to go look it up and find the answer yourself, which saves time. And so it can also do many things with specific policy examples. So together, that helped drop the average handling time down 64%. The other two numbers on the bottom here are around a very large wealth management company here in the States. And what their problem is that financial analysts that were talking to customers had a lot of questions around forms, like what's the correct form to do this, like say roll over an IRA or something. And they had a lot of just how do I do this type stuff. So the company has an internal contact center that just supports their financial analysts in the field. They deployed an IVA on the dashboard of these financial analysts and these customer service agents, not service agents, but basically the people that are helping their customers and their users with their own bank accounts and so on. And the IVA is able to help them with a lot of these questions, like which form do I use to complete a 401k rollover or something. The IVA can just fetch them that form and say, use this. That time reduction was huge for this company because having to call or contact over chat or something, this internal contact center, was taking a lot of time for these financial analysts. And so they were billing, basically, they were keeping track of the time spent on hold or getting answers to help the person sitting in front of them. And after the IVA was deployed, they figured out they're saving about $32 million annually just in time wasted by all of their analysts trying to get answers for specific forms and procedures. And they also saved about $1 million annually on the contact center side, just decreasing the volume of contacts. So this is just to give you an example that this really does have a huge impact on the efficiency of companies. So now it's demo time. I'm going to do a walkthrough demonstrating what a CSA sees and how they interact with the IVA during and after a call or chat. So Agent Assist is the integration of several Verint technologies such as IVA, IVR, agent dashboards, knowledge management, and so on. And you'll kind of see how they all work together in this demo.
Hi, I need to check on the status of claim number 146009.
So this is a simulation of an agent dashboard running on a CSA desktop with Agent Assist integrated. And what you're seeing on the bottom right is the Agent Assist window. So this is the IVA interface here. And what's happening is the IVA is actually listening in on the call. So as the call-in user is talking to the customer service agent, the human customer service agent, the IVA is also listening and is trying to help that CSA as it navigates the dashboard to do really whatever the user is asking to do. So they give a claim number. Apparently the speech rec or something messed up, and so it didn't get the right number. So the IVA listening in on the call tried to proactively fetch the record, couldn't find it, and then asked the CSA to please ask the caller to repeat the number, which they do.
I'm happy to help. Can you repeat the claim number?
146009.
So here, the IVA is listening to the call, gets the correct claim number this time, and pulls up the claim for the CSA in the dashboard automatically. Notice, just like in the web example earlier, the IVA is integrated into its environment and can control the agent dashboard.
Okay, thanks. Let me pull up that claim.
So here we see the IVA has got the right number, pulled the claim, popped it to the agent dashboard, and now gives a basically tells the CSA what the current status is. It has been issued a CPL, whatever that means.
It looks like a conditional payment letter has been issued for that claim. Do you have any further questions?
So here we see the CSA is unsure of what the meaning of the acronym CPL that the user gave meant. So now we see really how the agent is helping the CSA while also listening on the call. The human agent types into the input window there, what is a CPL? So she asks the agent, what is the definition of this thing? The agent responds with the definition and also says, here's some additional topics that relate to that if you're needing those as well. This prevents the CSA from having to navigate to a different screen or go into a different system to look up the acronym themselves or go search for it, saving time on the call or preventing placing the user on hold if they need to contact a different department just to get some info. And the IVA can also be integrated into multiple back-end knowledge bases and can service questions related to any of them through this singular interface. This allows the CSA to focus on the conversation at hand and quickly use the IVA support whenever they need it.
Yeah. When might I get that letter?
So now we see the IVA goes back to listening to the caller now.
It looks like it'll arrive around July 20th, 2019. Is there anything else I can help you with?
So as the IVA is listening to the caller, it extracts the user's intention of fetching the response date from the utterance, and then answers the question for the CSA using the CPL that is currently in the context of the conversation. So that CPL that's popped up on the screen within the dashboard, the agent is able to extract the information that was requested from it and just tell the CSA exactly, basically the answer to the question. So notice this also is a very contextual user question. A stateless chatbot would not be able to answer this question such as that letter is ambiguous. The user just said, when do I get that letter? The IVA knows the context of the conversation so far has been around a specific CPL, and it uses that CPL to answer the question. The CSA just needs to relay the information to the user.
No, that's it. Thank you.
So once the call ends, the IVA receives the hang-up event. At this point, the IVA moves on to record the call disposition for the CSA. Based on the caller intents that were seen in the conversational history, the IVA looks up the most relevant code and verifies it with the CSA. So they say, would you agree, this was code 1234 claim status. The CSA agrees that the appropriate code was given, and the IVA tags the call with that code, which gets recorded for reporting and so on. This is a huge time saver for CSAs, as they no longer have to search for codes themselves and click through the dashboard UI to tag the call record and do all the navigation. The IVA is doing all that navigation for them. It's doing the tagging, it's recording everything. The IVA is automating much of the busy work, and the CSA can just focus on the calls. So this is the alternate path, where the CSA disagrees with what the IVA suggested. So in this case, since the agent disagreed with the IVA's suggested code, the IVA presents a list of other related codes for the CSA to choose from, or they can type in whatever they want into the input box. The CSA selects one, and the IVA tags the call with that code and then asks the CSA what they want to do next. As the IVA did not correctly choose the disposition code the first time around, this conversation will be flagged with the IVA chosen code and the CSA chosen code, so that the IVA can be further trained to correct the code selection for the future. So this is just training data that helps the IVA improve as it guessed something and it was corrected by the CSA. The CSAs are contributing to the intelligence of this IVA as it moves along through these calls. So notice through this call, most of the work of the CSA has been automated by the IVA. This hybrid approach still allows the callers to talk to a real human that can express sympathy and provide natural responses, but the service time is greatly improved as all of the navigation through the UI and the dashboard and searching has been automated for the CSA. If a caller had some complex workflow that the IVA had not yet been trained on, the CSA can still take control of the dashboard and go through the standard procedures to help the caller reach resolution. They're not required to use the IVA, but it is there to help them as much as it can. So given that demo of what the experience looks like to a CSA, I'm now going to cover some case studies in detail of real clients we have that have deployed internal IVAs to help them decrease costs while increasing customer experience. Some of these show really that in the real world, there are many gains that can be made from this hybrid workforce. Each of these are a different style of internal IVA deployment, showing the flexibility of the IVA, as I mentioned earlier in the talk. They can really be deployed anywhere that you feel led to put them. So our first one is highlighting a public and private deployment of an IVA. And this is through Amtrak. And Amtrak is the largest passenger railroad service in the United States. It serves 500 destinations in the US and Canada, has more than 87,000 people ride Amtrak trains daily. Many people don't actually realize that Amtrak is actually the operating name for a quasi-public corporation, which is the National Railroad Passenger Corporation, which receives about $1.4 billion of US government funding annually. Amtrak's budget is allocated on a yearly basis from all of this government funding, making long-term financial planning difficult. So facing funding cuts from the government and high volumes of website bookings, Amtrak developed an IVA to reduce call center contacts. In 2012 is when they started this digital transformation. They went through focusing on the customer journey and the digital experience with their brand. So this really demonstrates how the same IVA is available to customers on the external website can be reused for internal CSAs, helping them find information quickly. There were two deployments, Ask Julie and Super Julie, but they're really the same technology. It's the same language models with some extensions for operations that internal CSAs can perform that you can't perform externally as a customer. And Super Julie has additional knowledge, but they have a large shared knowledge base. So we were able to reuse all of that external knowledge from Ask Julie for the Super Julie, which is the internal facing customer support version, and just simply add to that, which cut a lot of development time and effort on launching the IVA and maintaining it. So Ask Julie on the external side answers about 14,000 questions a day, or about 10 per minute. And there's some numbers here demonstrating really the effectiveness of the solution. So they got an 8x return on investment just in the first year of deployment. And they've seen 50% year-over-year growth in the self-service usage on the customer-facing side over the last 7 years. They've seen a 30% increase in revenue generated per booking, and part of that was because the workflow required to book a train ticket on their website at the time the IVA was launched was very convoluted. And people had a lot of questions about, when you say this, what do you mean? What information do I need to put in here, and that sort of stuff. And through conversations with Julie, we were able to optimize those workflows, and now they actually redesigned their website to be more efficient. The internal side supports about 2,000 employees daily for Amtrak. So our next example is the wealth management company that I mentioned some stats for earlier. And this is really interesting because it's highlighting internal call deflection, not external call deflection. And they were trying to cut down on the internal support calls for their financial analysts and client advisors, like I said before, earlier. But it was really their contact center agents who were involved in helping the company assess this 35% reduction, as they were asked to engage with the IVA upon receipt of a call to see if that question that was posed by the FAs or CAs who placed the call could have been resolved by the IVA. So the contact center people were running an IVA on their dashboard. And when somebody called, they would check to see, does the IVA know the answer? And if so, basically what they did was a survey. And as a result of that survey, they found that the IVA really could take over most of this work. And this launched back in 2007, and it supports an advisory team of financial analysts and client advisors of over 15,000 people within this company. And this company, like, they have a good amount of money, and they had already deployed some of the most powerful tools in the industry, yet employees were spending over 3 hours every day just navigating the various systems, apps, and forms that they had to do to get their job done. So since the IVA is a full desktop integration, it has comprehensive knowledge of the entire company's 3,000 products and 400 different applications. They've since started basically removing the option to call the service network directly. And you have to go through the IVA first, and then you can escalate still if necessary. But they've seen a 98% adoption rate by their analysts through this application. It's able to answer most of their questions. It answers about 27,000 questions per day, and it integrates into over 400 different back-end systems. They've got various business units within this company, and they all have their different forms and terminologies and so on that are siloed. And so this IVA is really the bridge that puts all these pieces of the company together in one place. And as I said on the previous slide earlier on, it saved the company about $1 million a year in reduction to, like, how do I do this calls from the FAs and CAs to their internal network. So my last example here is around an HR company, and this is really highlighting a multi-tenant solution. So Alight Solutions is an international human capital and benefit administration company. They support over 23 million people and their families globally. And one of the big things that they have going on is open enrollment. And that's when people are able to make changes to their health insurance benefits, as well as retirement and so on. And they get a huge volume of contacts with questions about options and the various different plans available and so on. And they're multi-tenant solutions. So Alight is basically an HR support company that goes on and other companies buy their solutions. And what they wanted to do was have a singular IVA that was customized to each of their clients. So it could ask questions customized to their plans and so on. But they didn't want to have to launch an IVA specific to every single customer they had because they had so many of them. So they launched a single IVA that is multi-tenant. And this is an employee facing, and they identified what the top 5 highest call volumes were first. It was around annual enrollment, health savings accounts, password reset issues, medical benefits, and retirement benefits. And since this IVA experience is personalized to every company that deploys their A-Lite solution to their employees, you get a personalized experience, but it allows global insight for A-Lite because they get the all of the data in one place from all of these different users. And by this deployment, which is a fairly recent one, they've seen about 4 million interactions or conversations in the last 2 years. And they had a 67% reduction in live chat to A-Lite after the launch of this IVA. 86% of the questions asked were drove to resolution, they were understood. And they also noticed about 30% of these conversations were happening outside of their call center hours. So the IVA works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, doesn't get sick, doesn't call on vacation. So it led to some real efficiencies for this HR space. So that's it. I went through basically what an IVA is, some ideas around how to deploy them internally. There's various ways you can do that. And some of the benefits of using humans and machines working together. They have their own strengths and weaknesses, and you're really trying to leverage the strengths of both when you put them together. I talked through Agent Assist, which is one way that Verint uses humans and machines to work together. And went through some case studies of some real customers that have seen some real benefits by launching internal facing IVAs for different problems. So thank you.
Ian, some amazingly compelling, or not so amazing, but some amazing compelling numbers that you've shared with us. And thank you for being so transparent across the different verticals where IVAs are being used. It certainly tells a very good story. So for some questions, and we hope we're going to get some more, you mentioned throughout today's session multiple technologies like real-time speech, RPA, etc. Is everything that you mentioned required to make this successful, or what is the best approach? Ian, you need to unmute.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're back. Here you go.
Okay. Yes. So I was saying that everything I mentioned isn't necessarily required because these things are very customized to the individual, really the challenges that that organization is facing. So one of the things we do is when a client contacts us and says they're interested in some of our products or solutions, we really try to understand what is the problem, what is the root of the problem. And so we look at things like what are the top call drivers, what are the main reasons people are contacting you. We do a bunch of data analysis on their behalf, and we say, this is really where we recommend you start with automation because this is the low-hanging fruit, and this is where you'll see the biggest ROI. And so whatever the solution looks like to solve that problem for that customer is where we start. And then you can always grow from there.
Okay. Another question, and this is about approach. Do you have a view on whether we should start using customer-facing chatbots and then work into the internal ones, or should we start internally and then go external to customer?
Well, kind of following the coattails of the last answer, it depends. And it's really around understanding your business and where are your costs going. So if you are like the financial company where you have a huge internal cost, you have internal employees contacting internal support, and you're wasting a lot of people's time in doing that. If you attach a value to that, a dollar to that, and you can say, we would save much more money in internal efficiencies than we would gain with an external agent helping cut down our external call center volumes. Maybe you'd start there. But maybe if you are in a position where you are a product company and you have a lot of products and you get a lot of product support contacts, and a lot of those things are things that could be easily answered around, warranties or stuff like that. And if the volume is sufficient that the cost is very high to increase that human presence in the contact center, well, maybe that would be the better place to start. But the idea is that there isn't a right starting place or solution that I can say every company needs to start here, every company needs to do this. It's really going to be understanding your company, understanding your challenges and where your money is being spent, and then figuring out where the highest savings are in automation and starting there.
Excellent. We're going to change tack a little bit with your permission. In Australia, there's been a lot of growth in onshore BPOs. So my question is, do you have BPOs using this solution to support multiple customers?
Yes, we definitely do. We have some financial customers that basically do credit card support for lots of different companies. So many store branded credit cards and things are hired out through a central financial company. They're given on behalf of another company. And so those financial companies, they answer questions about credit card accounts and billing and all that stuff for all of these different store branded cards and things. And so you have a huge multi-tenant solution where a contact center might be handling calls for 15, 20, 30 different companies, but they're all related around the common financial issues. And so in that case, we have launched internal IVAs, helping those CSAs automate, like I showed in the demo, automate many of their tasks, but they are helping, in a sense, many different companies through that singular point of contact.
Fantastic. And we only have one more question. And the question is, can I use the same solution to power both self-service and internal agent support? And if I can, will it be capable of handling the quirks between them?
Yes, so Amtrak was a perfect example of this. It is the same deployment in the sense that we did all of the work for the external agent was reused for the internal one, but obviously there were some back-end integrations and some differences in tasks that the internal employees are performing versus what external customers are able to do. So those things are separated in the agent as basically who's talking to me. So if I have an internal client talking to me and the agent knows based on what basically the contact point that you launched the IVA from, if an external user launched me, then I know I have basically this set of intentions I can perform. If an internal person launched me, I have this set of things that I can perform. And so by using the contacting channel to basically select or turn on and turn off abilities, you can use the same deployment to actually handle both sides. And it does get a little tricky just because those differentiations have to be clearly defined, and that's part of the development and the deployment process, but it's totally possible.
Fantastic. Well, Ian, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And I'm going to say dumbing things down for me personally. I'm not speaking for everybody else, but really making it very easy to understand, and for also staying up so late at night where you're located. I hope the coffee's good. Any closing remarks on that?
No, I think we've got some contact info here on the screen. If you have any follow-up questions that you weren't able to ask, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to either answer them or point you to the person or persons that could answer them for you. We also have a blog you can follow and so on that gives some basically overviews of different aspects of our technology that I haven't had time to cover in this talk.
Thank
And
you. Well, we're so privileged having had you for the last 2 webinars, having the Chief Scientist from Verint sharing the breadth and depth of his knowledge. And we look forward to seeing you or hearing from you in 2020. With that, I'm going to bring the webinar to a close. Thank you everyone that attended today, and wherever you are, have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.